Come be a part of Doc Holliday's Rock Splitting Politics with your host, Dr. Ed Holliday. Hear the voices of liberty speaking all across America. Doc Holliday provides thought-provoking interviews and commentary about the issues and actions that are afflicting this country and what we need to do to get America back on track. Get fired up, get inspired, get on board with Doc Holliday's Rock Splitting Politics right now.
And here we go.
And that's the sound of rock cracking. You've got Doc Holliday's Rock Splitting Politics right here on webtalkradio.net. I'm your host, Dr. Ed Holliday, and yes, we're going to dig into some politics. The last week we had a show about gold. If you didn't get to hear that show, very important. What do you do about gold these days? Do you need some gold? Well, we had Jack Haney there, and he really filled us in on some great questions. So go back, if you didn't get to listen to that show, go back and listen to last week's show. We have had great interviews in this past month. Newt Gingrich. We've had just shows that I want you to, if you missed them, go back and listen to. But today's show, we're digging into who is this nominee from the Democratic Party. His name is Joe Biden, but is it the Joe Biden that we've known for the last 50 years? If it is, then why are they trying to hide him in the basement? If it's not the same Joe Biden, why are they trying to hide him in the basement? And when he says he wants to help America, well, he's been at it for 50 years. 50 years. He's been at it in the government. Donald Trump's had 3.5 years. Why would someone think that they could change things if they've been in power for 50 years? Him and Schumer and Pelosi. Schumer and Pelosi have been up there not as long as Joe Biden, but almost. And you think, who is this nominee that the Democratic Party is presenting? Well, he had some trouble in the interview last week. He always has some gaffes. But maybe it's coming from his heart now that he can't think as well. I don't know. Is his mental capacity diminished? The American people need to know. We need to have another debate. The Trump team offered to have a fourth debate start in September because people are going to start voting in September. And it seems like the Democrats are trying to hide their nominee because they don't put him out for broad questions. They don't put him out for a news conference. He never is out more than a few minutes. And now they decline. They do not want Joe Biden to debate a fourth debate before people start voting. Early voting starts in September in some states, in some places. And absentee voting for military and others will be going out soon. And now we have a major party, the Democratic Party, that's not putting their nominee out there for questions, from broad questions from reporters. And when they do, he's stumbling. And we're going to play some of those clips today. We're going to play what's going on. And we need to understand the vice presidential pick. Is it Joe Biden's pick, or is somebody picking her for him? He said it's going to be a woman. And there's been demands that it be an African-American woman. But is Joe Biden doing his own picking? Or has he got a team? Or who is running? Who's running the show behind Joe Biden? Who's going to be the real president? It won't be the vice president. It's whoever's making the decisions now. Who is that? Do we know? Can we ask Joe? Well, there's a reporter last week asked him something about what he had said about cognitive tests. And then he said he'd been taking them on a regular basis. Then he blew up at the reporter. And it's just amazing. It was an African-American reporter. If Trump had done that, they'd have been accusing him of racism. Oh, talking about that. What did he say in his gaffe? Well, let's go ahead and get started. Let me play a clip right off the Rush Limbaugh Show last week, because Rush really set it up well, and it's amazing what Joe Biden said, and the mainstream media is massaging his words and saying things he didn't say. So take a listen to this.
We need to start at the top of the audio soundbite. So let's go back to Wednesday. National Association Black Journalists, National Association of Hispanic Journalists, virtual convention. This is NPR's Lulu Garcia Navarro talking to Biden. Will you re-engage with Cuba?
Yes, and by the way, what you all know, but most people don't know, unlike the African-American community, with notable exceptions, the Latino community is an incredibly diverse community with incredibly different attitudes about different things.
How do you walk that back?
How do you walk that back? Rush asked the question we need to know. How do you walk that back? And yet, the Biden team jumped on it. They knew what Biden had said was something that was incredibly racist, if you want to use that term. I don't like to use the term racist, but he was pointing out the African American community did not have diversity like the Latin community. Those are the words he used, and that's what came out of his heart. And the Biden team was hoping nobody would pick up on it, but Rush Limbaugh did, and others did, and then they had to answer to it. Let me play a little more of this clip from the Rush Limbaugh Show.
The media wasn't going to do anything with it. They're just sitting on it. Just hope it goes by. But, well, okay. You may be right. It didn't take off until we hit it. And after we framed it then it took off like a rocket, and we're now on day 2 of it. So here is a montage of media attempting to defend Biden. Now, remember what he's just said. Now, by the way, what you all know, most people don't know, but you people, you Hispanics, you know this. Unlike the African-American community, the Latino community is an incredibly diverse community, unlike the African-American community. Latinos have incredibly different attitudes about different things. So.
And Rush just frames it up so well. In a minute, I'm going to play the part of the show where they tell you what the drive-bys were saying. The drive-by media, meaning the mainstream media. They were taking up for Joe Biden, and we're going to listen to that. But first, I just want to remind everybody in the audience how incredibly wrong that Joe Biden is, but he is the mirror of the entire Democratic Party and what they think about the African-American population. If you don't think like Joe Biden when he said, if you ain't black, if you vote for Trump, then you ain't black. You remember when he said that just a few weeks ago? And now he's saying this, but it shows the Democratic Party believes and wants the black community in America to be all Democrats. If you are not a Democrat and you're African American, you're not wanted. People don't want to know you exist. How many African Americans have we had on Doc Holliday's rock splitting politics? And they are some Trump supporters. They are just vividly imaginative, intellectually strong and stout, and yet they are not recognized by anyone in the mainstream media or anyone in the Democratic Party. They want the world, they want everybody in America to think that people who are African American and who support Donald Trump, they don't want people to think they even exist. And if they do exist, they're an Uncle Tom. If they do exist, they are, something's wrong with them. They're like Kanye West that has mental problems, is what some people would say. And it's just incredibly wrong. And yet Joe Biden, they, just like the Democrats try to do on so many things, they have these smoke and mirrors that keep people from seeing the truth and how they really believe. And here we have someone who may be in a mental decline in his late 70s, and he's just speaking what comes out of his heart. And what is happening is this is exactly what the Democratic Party has for years thought about the African American community, that they are monolithic. They can only vote for Democrats. And if they don't vote for Democrats, then they're not really African American. That's the message that is sent out from the Democratic Party. Joe Biden said it himself last month, and he just said it again when he said they were monolithic last week. Wow. Now, Rush played on the show a montage, and he mentioned that. So let me play that, and then we'll take a little break. But it's incredible what is going on and how the mainstream media is massaging the words, adding words they want. They're not reporting news. They're adding the words that they want so that Donald Trump could get defeated in November. Let's let the truth win out for once. Let somebody tell the truth that's a reporter. Stop the fake news. Now, let me play this last little clip from Rush about what Joe Biden said last week. This is the montage of the mainstream media. He calls them the drive-bys of what they were saying, and they were trying to interpret what for interpreting it in a good way, massaging the words that Joe Biden said last week.
We make a big deal of it. We force the drive-bys to have to go out there and try to position this and explain it and defend plugs, tell us what he meant, and here's a montage of that.
Biden's campaign insists he was referring to diversity of attitudes among Latinos.
An advisor adding, of course Biden knows the black community is not a monolith.
The African American community, by and large, very loyal and has been well served by the Democratic Party, inartful or not. I think that's what Vice President Biden was saying.
Biden is not the candidate who is the most fluent candidate on issues of race.
The African-American community and Latinos know him. Whatever gaffes he's making are not intentional, and they certainly aren't intentionally racist.
They are. This is the thing. This guy is a segregationist. He goes back to the early days in his career, which was the heyday of the Democrat segregation. But see how this works? He gets to go out and say things that are blatantly racist. And here come the media. Oh, no. He doesn't really mean that. No. Whatever gaffes he's making, they're not intentional. They certainly aren't intentionally racist, but yet they are, because there's so many. This guy can't talk about people without talking about race.
Can you see how biased the press is? And we hear time and time people like Jake Tapper and others saying, oh, there's no bias in the press. No, and you can hear it blatantly here. If it was Donald Trump who had said those words, he would be massacred by the mainstream media. And here we got people not even reporting. They are trying to massage the words that former Vice President Joe Biden said. And yet, when Rush Limbaugh was talking about when he came into the Senate, when Joe Biden came into the Senate, he was a Democrat. He worked with the Southern Democrats. I know because I'm from Mississippi. There was a big segregationist of the Jim Crow era from Mississippi, Big Jim Eastland. And he was friends with Joe Biden. And he was friends with Ted Kennedy. Senator Eastland had been in the Senate for decades. And Joe Biden came in and worked with Jim Eastland, Senator Eastland from Mississippi. And some of his segregationist views of Joe Biden, maybe he got from Jim Eastland. I don't know. But some of the things that Joe Biden said about the race in the 70s, they don't fly today. And yet he's nominated as being the standard bearer of the Democratic Party. And I'm just telling you that the drive-by media, the mainstream media, instead of reporting the news, they either have fake news or they're massaging what Joe Biden's saying. I think the American people are fair, and they need to see this nominee. They need to see this nominee in press conferences. They need to see him for at least an hour, but answering questions from all the press. He's wanting to be the president of the United States of America. The American people get to vote on who our leader is. Don't hide him in a basement. We need to know who the Democratic nominee is. Bring him out. Bring him out. Now, let me stop here and just remind you, you're listening to Doc Holliday's Rock Splitting Politics right here on webtalkradio.net, and we're glad to have you. We got a lot of new listeners because of the presidential election. We have a lot going on in politics, and you hear things here on Doc Holliday's Rock Splitting Politics you just may not hear anywhere else. We're glad to bring a show each week. A new show goes up every Monday morning, but we got some great archive shows. So if you're not familiar with Doc Holliday's Rock Splitting Politics, if you want to know about history, the last few months, a few years, just go back in the archive section, and you can pretty much see what's been happening in America. And we do things and interview people that you're just not going to hear anywhere else but right here on Doc Holliday's Rock Splitting Politics. So we're glad you're listening. Tell your friends and neighbors about us. We do got a Facebook page. You can go look at that and like that. And we try to put some things up during the week, but we don't just load down of all kind of things on that. We respect your time, and we want you to contact us. You can go to the front page of the website there, and you can send an email. We can't respond to all of them, but be glad to read that. Like to read your email and what you think. But now, one thing I do want to say is we do have a book called Bedrock Truth, and I wrote that book with Dr. Alveda King and Dr. Alex McFarland. You can get that book by, again, going to our website. Front page there, you'll see the book cover. Just click on that. It'll take you to www.docholliday.org. Holiday's got 2 L's in it. Now, in just a minute, we're going to get to what Joe Biden thinks about this vice president pick, who's picking the vice president, and why it's important to know who's picking that. And also, we'll be getting to some of the what's happening in the campaign of what Joe Biden's saying. We're going to discuss some of that, play some clips. But first, let me play this clip from the mayor of Portland, where they've been demonstrating and rioting just about every night for the last 60 days. And then last week, they actually had barred some police in a precinct. And they were away from the federal building, the federal courthouse, and they went out more into some communities. They barred the door in a police precinct with police in there, and they tried to light a fire, and they were going to burn it down, or some of them wanted to. And this is what the mayor of Portland had to say.
This is last night. He held a news conference to talk about the riots. Listen to this.
When you commit arson with an accelerant in an attempt to burn down a building that is occupied by people that you have intentionally trapped inside, you are not demonstrating. You are attempting to commit murder. You are creating the B-roll film that will be used in ads nationally to help Donald Trump during his campaign. You don't want to be part of that? Then don't show up.
May I translate this for you? What do you think this guy was saying there, Mr. Snerdley? I just say, there's no right or wrong. I just want to know. What do you think he's saying? Right. The mayor of Portland, Oregon, is telling rioters that, yeah, they're attempting murder, but worse than that is that they're helping Trump. You know, if it wouldn't help Trump, the fact that you're, maybe killing people wouldn't be that big a deal. But since it's helping Trump, you gotta stop it.
Well, do you think Rush was a little over the top? That committing murder is one thing, but if you're helping Trump, you gotta stop it. And that's what he was saying, the mayor of Portland. And I almost laugh a little. It's serious though, because people were in there police were going to die if that building was lit on fire. And so it's not a laughing matter. What is laughing is the fact that Rush was pointing out they probably let him keep protesting, except for the fact he realizes this may be helping Donald Trump to get reelected. So for the sake of the country, the mayor's saying stop that because you're going to get Trump reelected. So it's a little bit, shows you the crazy world we're in. And this mayor in Portland, leftist, left to the left. And I hope that ordinary, mainstream American people are taking all this in, and I think they are. This is not the kind of America we want when we have leaders like the mayor in Portland, the governor in Washington, and the mayor in Seattle. You know, like I've said before in this program, if this was 1860, Jefferson Davis would be saying, "Where is the governor of Washington? Where's Governor NC?" Because he is no Abraham Lincoln, and these mayors are no Abraham Lincoln. They would have told the South, keep slavery, keep, succeed. Go ahead, just don't let anybody get hurt. They would have let the South go. But no, Abraham Lincoln saw what was needed for a country to grow strong, and in a generation later to defend the world in World War I, to defeat Nazi Germany and Imperial Japan in World War II, and to fight the long Cold War with Ronald Reagan finally breaking the back of the Soviet Union, the communist Leninist society that was brought upon this world and wreaked havoc on this world, where communism and socialism always does. And yet, we got people now who are Marxist, leading an organization called Black Lives Matter. It's a Marxist organization, and they are getting praise and money, and they're getting support from American corporations even. Now, the American people have to see through this. And thank goodness Joe Biden brought to our attention. He brought to our attention that the African American community is not monolithic. Even though he said they were, we know they're not. And that is the strength of America, the strength of Black America. And we've had many African Americans on this show, and I'm proud of the reach out we've given to let people know, especially African Americans, you aren't alone. Even though the mainstream media doesn't want to hear you if you're a Trump supporter, even though the mainstream media does not want to hear you if you're conservative, if you don't follow along with the socialist, Democrat, now Marxist environment, then you ain't black, is what Joe Biden said. Absolutely false. Absolutely wrong. And now, America's going to come to the time they got to make up her mind. One of the things we're looking at is the vice presidency. Who is Joe Biden going to pick to be the next vice president if he is elected? I had to add that, Well, is he picking the best person? Well, he says it's got to be a woman. And many people are saying it's got to be an African-American woman. And you go down the list, there's not a conservative there. There are plenty of conservative African-American women that could make a great vice president. Everybody from Condoleezza Rice, Candace Owens. There's a long list. And yet he's going to pick a liberal. You got Karen Bass, Congresswoman from California, who's praised Fidel Castro all her life. And trying to be vice president, she's walked back some of that, saying she would not do that again if she knew how people in Florida felt about Fidel Castro. Well, why didn't she ask the people in Florida, the Congress people in Florida, the Democratic Congress people in Congress, the congressmen and congresswomen from Florida, she had years to ask them how they felt. But she never did. She just praised Fidel Castro, his regime, and overlooked all the murders and the political prisoners and the lack of freedom. She never talked about it. And she is being considered to be the vice president candidate for the Democratic Party. What does that tell you, America? What does that tell you about Joe Biden? Is Joe Biden going to make the pick, or somebody behind Joe Biden making the pick? America, we need to know more about this Democratic nominee. And if they don't put him out there, you don't vote for what you don't know. Wow. I tell you, this is going to be a very packed, moving next 90 days till we get to November 3rd. Stay tuned with Doc Holliday's Rock Splitting Politics. We'll bring you some things you won't hear anywhere else. Glad to have you listening. See you again next week.
Thanks for joining us today, and remember to listen again next week for another edition of Doc Holliday's Rock Splitting Politics. You can order Ed's new book, Bedrock Truths, by clicking on the book cover right in front of you on the screen, or visit DocHolliday.org. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you again next week.